Buenas, buenas. Welcome to Music Marketing TV. I'm Kevin Ochoa, and today we're going to be talking about FL Studio in the context of Pro Tools users or users coming from another DAW. Hi Ganesh, how's it going? I hope you guys are doing well, and we're going to wait a few minutes to have everyone roll into the class. Probably another 5 minutes to have everyone nicely situated. Also, so people get the notifications that we've gone live. And as you guys start rolling into the live stream, let me know where you guys are viewing us from. Hey, what's up? How's Texas right now? How's it over there? It's getting warm over here in California. It's starting to get up there to like 75 degrees. What's up, Malleus? So it appears to me that the live stream is probably I'm probably 30 seconds ahead of you guys, but that's good timing. That gives me enough time to see your questions and be able to respond to them. Okay, so at 11:10 we're gonna start with the class, and I also want to let you guys know that we have more classes coming up. So next week we're gonna be covering recording and audio editing, and then June 18th we're gonna be covering MIDI editing. June 25 we're gonna be covering FL Studio synthesizers. July 16 it's gonna be a FL Studio Effects, and July 23rd we're gonna be doing a review. How's it going, Alec? So yeah, today it's all going to be about introduction to FL Studio's workflow. So I want to basically demystify the way FL Studio works. I know a lot of people are coming from another DAW. They're used to working in a linear fashion, but FL Studio does not work like that, at least up front. So I'm going to guide you guys through baby steps, and then we're going to work on a track. Wow, it's 100 degrees in India. That is pretty hot, man. That we rarely have that. We'll have that maybe 3 or 4 times a year in California. That's pretty hot. Okay, it's 11:10, so let's get going. So today we're going to be talking about FL Studio's workflow. Before that, we need to talk a little bit about the history and a little bit about some of the young artists that FL Studio has been famous for being used by. So we're going to cover a little bit of the history, and we're going to explain why it's so popular with young artists. We're going to talk about workflow and signal flow, which are very important. And FL Studio started around 1997 by Didier Dambrin, who's one of the developers at Imagine, and Imagine was a video game company back in the 90s. And he created FL Studio to make music for their video games. So instead of having to license music from other people, he just created a sequencer to make music. FL Studio was officially launched in 1998, which is almost 23 years ago. I think it might, 22 years ago, going on to 23. So it's, I'm barely older than FL Studio, which is pretty crazy. It was, like I said, a very small sequencer, and now it's become a full-fledged DAW, and it goes far beyond what a DAW usually does, which we'll talk about later. Since then, FL Studio has included multi-track recording, audio restoration features, which other DAWs don't come included with, which is something I am appalled by every time I open up a DAW that doesn't have audio restoration features. FL Studio has a declipper, denoiser, a spectrum editor as well, so it's very powerful. It also has pitch editing technology, and of course we have over 30 instruments and over 45 effects. So it's a very large program. However, it's only like around a 500 megabyte download, somewhere around there. So it's not that big on your computer, whereas other programs would take up gigabytes and gigabytes and gigabytes of data to install. FL Studio for Mac was released in 2018. So if you guys are living under a rock and we're not aware of that, go pick up the demo. It's available for Mac. Unlike many companies, Imagen offers VST versions of their native plugins, and most companies don't do this. If you use Studio One, Logic, or any company's stock plugins, the downside to that is if you learn to use their plugins, you cannot take the compressor from Studio One and take it to another DAW. You can't take the distortion unit from Logic and take it to another DAW. Whereas with FL Studio, they offer VST versions of their plugins, so you can take them into other DAWs. So if you have a copy of Growth Suite, you can take it to another DAW. If you own the FL Studio Juice Pack, you can take FL Studio's metering plugins and take them to another DAW. So it's very awesome because you can learn to produce in FL Studio. You can start learning audio engineering in FL Studio. And then once you make the switch to another DAW, if you want to, if your business requires you to use ProTools, then you can take some of your metering plugins, some of your audio effects plugins, and take them to ProTools. FL Studio 20.7 even provides a video editing and video creation platform. So what FL Studio provides is absolutely brutal in comparison to other DAWs. And we got to remember that as of right now, FL Studio costs $200. For the baseline model, it's $200. For the Fruity edition, which is the basic edition that doesn't allow you to do audio editing, which is mainly to make sequences and whatnot, that's $100. And the one I really recommend is the $300 version, which is the Signature Edition, because that includes Growth Suite, Maximus. I believe Citrus is not included in both the Signature Bundle and the Producer Edition, but the Signature Bundle also has a Newtone and a few other plugins, and you can take those to other DAWs. So that leads us to the now. So let's take a look to FL Studio. And here is FL. When you first load FL, what you'll see is that it's loaded up with 4 instruments. It's a kick, a clap, a hi-hat, and a snare. So let's get rid of the playlist and the mixer for now, and let's just focus on the channel rack. So the channel rack is essentially the heart and the soul of FL. It's the reason why FL works the way it does, why it's very easy to use for new users, and why after basically 20-something years, the channel rack has stayed with FL is because it's ease of use. Well, let me show you. So immediately, if I have no idea what I'm doing, I can still write sequences. So a beginner can pick this up without having 1 minute of music production experience and already start making sounds that sound actually quite nice and sequences that are actually in time, because you're not inputting note data with your keyboard, although I'll show you guys how to do that later. From the get-go, this is the simplest way to start sequencing music. If you want to expand upon this, you can simply drag this out. As you saw there, I deleted it simply by right-clicking and dragging. So it's as smooth as that. Very easy. And to expand this, like I said, I can drag this out and add a few more bars. Now you see right here, there's a little graph editor. I can click on it and then edit the velocities of my hits right here. I can even change the note pitch of them. And panning position. So it's very straightforward to use. There is not much to it, and that's what makes it very fascinating. Now let's clean up my hi-hats here. I'm just gonna right click and drag to remove them. Close the little graph editor. And let me see the questions you guys have. Okay. Again, let's clear this out. You're simply right clicking and dragging to remove steps. So now I want to make a reggaeton beat. Let's keep it on 2 bars. And straight up, let's just do this. This one's off. And down right there. There we go. Awesome. So now we have this little groove going. Now let's say I wanted to add another instrument. How do we do that? Very simple. You see this plus button? You click on it and you have your plugins. Even better, if you right click, boom, you have the actual visual representation of your plugins. Again, right click and select the plugin. So let's go with Harmless. Awesome. So now if I wanted to record into my sequencer, I can click right here. And I can select record as everything. And now I'm going to press play. And it recorded that little stab. So as you can see, it's a little bit off. Let's bring it over here. I'm going to press Ctrl Q to quantize it. But I can copy and paste it over. And there we go, we got a little sequence going. Now, what you'll notice now is that there's a little box over here on the left-hand side of all my instruments. And they all have little numbers. So this one has 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if I pull up my mixer, that is where the instruments are going. So my kick, if I solo it by pressing Control left click, to solo that instrument, it's being played through track 1. Clap is through track 2. Hat, track 3. Snare, track 4. And the Harmless, the instrument that we just loaded, it's not going to track 5. It's actually going straight to the master. So what happens is we have to tell FL Studio to send it to the master. or I mean to the track that we would like. In this case, we can choose track 5. And now we're setting it to the track we liked. Now let's say we wanted to arrange this. We can load up the arranger, which in FL Studio is called the playlist. This guy up here, you see these buttons. These all route to whatever panel I want to open, whether it's the arrangement window, the notes editor, or the piano roll as we like to call it in FL, the channel rack, which is where all my instruments, sounds, and clips are housed, the browser, the project picker, and the plugin picker, which is similar to right-clicking right here. See that? Except when you click up here, it also shows you your effects. So you can drag them in directly into the mixer. And now your track is color-coded and linked automatically to the track on the channel rack. So that's really cool. Now, if I wanted to arrange this pattern, I can simply use the brush tool, as you see up here. Here are my tool sets. I can just brush it in. As so. Okay, let's try to split up the patterns because they're all being played by this one track right here, which is track 1, right? So it's right click and select split by channel. Now all my patterns are going to be independent. All my sounds are going to be independent from each other now. So instead of the pattern triggering all my sounds over here, my new pattern will only trigger that specific track, which will be my kick. You can see right here in the mixer. And the snare will only trigger the snare now. And the harmless will only trigger the harmless pattern. Awesome. So now I can tell it, hey, let's delete all these other. And let's start off with just the kick and the snare. And we'll introduce the melody in the 5th bar. So let's say we wanted to make one of these patterns a little bit different from each other. Let's go to that last pattern on the kick, make it unique, and now the kick pattern has become pattern number 2. So now I can delete the last kick drums, and now when I play back this pattern over here, there's going to be no kick drums right there, but it's not going to affect my other patterns. Whereas if I had done that with this kick pattern over here, while they were all the same, and I deleted them, they would all be deleted in every single pattern. Because essentially what we're doing is we're triggering these patterns, not necessarily which are then triggering the MIDI, right? So the MIDI is linked to the pattern, not the track. So if I were to move the track over here, it doesn't really matter. So what I'm trying to say here is that essentially the arranger, the piano roll, the playlist inside FL Studio is just a trigger. It's a huge trigger pad that's sending information to be turned on in the channel rack. And the channel rack is the one that dictates the track and where the audio is sent to. So if I grab that harmless and put it in track 7 per se, it's not going to come out of track 7. It's going to keep coming out of track 5 because that's where it was linked. I drag to track 8. The same thing. So I'm going to press Ctrl-Alt-Z to go back and undo my changes. There you go. And as you can see there, if I kept pressing Ctrl-Alt-Z, I can keep going back. I can also open up my browser right here and go under my current project and history. I can also access it through here. So the browser has different tabs, and under current project, go to history. We can go back and forth through our history. Awesome. So now let's say this was our track. Let's add a master effect. We have a fruity limiter on there by default because ImageLine doesn't want young kids to blow out their ears, but let's say we don't like that. Let's delete it. And then we'll add an EQ. By right-clicking here and opening up the Fruity EQ 2. Now, it's important to know that basically every plugin into FL Studio is vectorial. That means that you can resize them to be small or fully sized. All right, so let's say I wanted to create a sweep up effect. Let's turn this band into a high pass band. I'm gonna set it to be 48 dBs per octave. I'm gonna right click and select create automation clip. And now watch what's gonna happen. Right click, create automation clip, or simply right click, press A, and we have a clip right here. Now this clip allows me to automate that specific parameter. So now this parameter is gonna change what I'm hearing during playback. Awesome. And let's add one more effect to our master. I'm going to use Maximus, which is a maximizer. I'm not really going to push this, but let's add some pre-gain and a little bit of saturation. Okay. So we got an effects going, a little loop. Now let's say this was a whole song and we had to export it. We can go to File, Export, WAV file, and I'll send this to my, let's see, desktop. And we'll call it, actually let's send it to my FL Studio folder, which is under Documents. If I go to ImageLine, Data, FL Studio, Projects 2020. I can put it in here. We'll call it FL Studio Class 1. And here we have our rendering options. We can even upload to SoundCloud if we want, or another cloud account. And yeah, I'll explain this in more detail when we talk about audio editing in the next class. So let's press start. Bam. We render the audio out. Now if I go to my projects, you see the audio is right here. So let's mute our master effects by clicking this little button right here. That mutes all of our effects. And we'll also left click and control click to solo this track. And there we go. We rendered a track inside FL Studio. We learned how to use the channel rack. We also learned how to use the arranger, which is again called the playlist inside FL Studio. And we learned how to route audio in and out, or instruments in and out of FL Studio's mixer. Cool. So let's try to work and grow on this concept. So let's get rid of the harmless track right here. But we'll keep the kick, the snare pattern, because that's where I'm going to build this new track on. So let's press F4 to make a new pattern. Now I'm going to call this the hat pattern. I'm putting it on my playlist. Now what I'll do is press Control B to paste everything around. If you don't know your shortcuts, don't worry. You can just select this and use the brush tool. Just brush it in. That's simple. So if I go to my hi-hat, I can create a little sequence. Go to the graph editor. There we go. We got a new loop going. I'm going to add a new set of chords here. So I'm going to press F4 again to create a new pattern. If you don't know that shortcut, you can come up here to the pattern picker and press the plus button. And that will let you create a new pattern. So we'll call this chords. And I'm going to just do a simple 2-chord pattern. I'm going to go A minor and then I think this is G minor, G major inverted. Let's see. Yeah, it's G major inverted. Okay. So let's write this down. By recording, I'm going to set it to record as everything. You can tell it to record as audio if you want it to record as audio, which will then open up an Edison audio editor. And I'll explain that next class. But for now, let's just choose everything. So it detects automatically that I'm inputting MIDI information. I'm going to make sure that my recorder here is set to red. And you can tell it to give you to record the North start time or the end time. You can also tell it to give you a counter, and you can change the metronome instrumentation or instrument type here. So if you wanted a cowbell, you can do that, but let's stick with the click. So I'll press play. Hold on, let's slow this down because this is reggaeton after all. Let's go to 98 BPM. By the way, you can right click and automate the BPM as well. So that's pretty cool. Okay. That was really quiet. There's also delay in my signal when I'm recording, so please keep that in mind. You're not gonna have that delay personally. I'm just live streaming, so it's a little bit difficult to have everything run in the background and also try to record into FL Studio or any DAW for that matter. Wow, those are pretty off. Let's fix them real quick. So if you saw when I click on the pattern, if I double click, it automatically sends me to the piano roll because it detected the MIDI information there. So let's grab these guys, just drag them a little bit over to the center, and I'll grab this guy, I'll push it further front because it's too back. Then press Control A to select all of them, press Control Q to quantize them. As you saw, some of them are a little bit imperfect, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to grab the last one over here and pitch it down an octave. Now that I'm done recording, I'm going to press R to remove the record enable. I'm also going to turn off the metronome by pressing Control M or just by clicking up here, whatever you like. Now you notice that the velocities are different. The way I can now edit velocities here is by going to the control section and dragging the bottom tab up. So at first it's not very apparent when you're first using FL Studio. While you see these little 4 lines or 4 dots, they give you access to controls like note panning, velocity, note release, filter cutoff frequency, and other MIDI CC information. So let's go back to velocity. And we'll grab all these guys, double click on them, and then we can send the velocity, send them higher. Let's do the same with these guys over here. Make the velocities a little bit louder. And the same for these first chords over here. And now this should be a little bit more even. Okay, so that's pretty similar to what we had before. Now, What I want to do is add more instruments, but I'm not going to load them from right here, right? From where I usually could load them, right? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go into my preset manager that houses all the presets of all my plugins. So this is actually really cool that FL Studio has this, because most programs will only allow you to, let's say, if we open up a plugin, let's say I open up a Ogun, I could only change a preset by going into that plugin itself and changing the preset from the program itself. Now, what FL Studio allows you to do is use a plugin database and a plugin preset folder. Here we can have all our presets for all our plugins saved. That's really cool. And it also works for all our effects plugins as well. And third-party plugins too, if you would like to add them here. So that's amazing. I'm going to click on this folder right here, the FL Studio class, and I'm going to load up a pad. So let's do super saws. I'm going to filter them out, and I'm going to make the filter cutoff rise in time. And the same thing goes for the volume. Okay, so I'm going to use that as a first hit, and then we're going to have the other chord go through. All right, so it's, instead of actually playing them now, since we have the MIDI information, I can press Control A, Control C to copy this information, and then right click to go to the next piano roll, and press Control V to paste it. And now I can drag this over and drag this out. I'm gonna pitch it down an octave because, like I said, I want it to be a pad. And let's just drag this over a bit more to make this pad even longer. Again, we gotta route this, so let's route this right here. Now notice how the mixer is still set up to use that old instrument that we had, which was Harmer. Now I can press Control L to add the new track, which is my citrus. Awesome. I'm gonna load up another instrument. Again, I'm gonna go here, right click and press the plus button, load up citrus. But instead I'll choose a plugin right here. A preset, not a plugin. I think I said plugin. Here we go. We got a new bass. And now I can start sequencing this in. So and there we go. We got a nice little reggaeton beat and groove going. So it's as simple as that to start creating a track inside of FL Studio. Of course, you're going to be able to work in even quicker because you're not going to be explaining this to someone. And again, now we can hold this, drag this over and only include certain instruments to start creating a pattern or or an arrangement. So let's say we only wanted the pads in here. We can split this pattern again by right-clicking over here in the pattern picker, select split by channel, and now all my instruments that were in that chord pattern are not split into their own thing. So I'm going to leave the bass to play out in the 9th bar. However, I'm going to drag the pads and bring them over here. And I'm also going to bring the chords, drag them over here. Now what I want to do now is make these chords into a group. I'm going to press Control G to turn them into a group. And what I want to also do now is grab the second half of the chords and make them all hit on every offbeat. Whereas at the beginning, I want them to hit on only the 4th offbeat. You see over here, I messed up. I should have dragged this a little bit further to the right, but there you go. Now you noticed earlier that I dragged the pattern clip right here and made it a little bit smaller. So the cool thing about FL is that you can kind of treat this clips as audio. So as you saw, I can group them together, I can cut them up, I can also shorten them, I can extend them if I wanted them to. I could even do tricks like this. If I change the step editing to be representing a quarter beat or a 4th of a beat, I can drag these over and have them play over each other. So I'm going to press Control G, and now that's a group. Of course, the velocity is going to be a little bit weird, so let's fix these. And let's say I wanted to have a double hit of my kick right here. I can slice that piece of clip. I can press P to go back to my pen tool, drag this over, and I can hold this, just click it, and click again to copy that double kick over, or that kick over. And usually this works better when we don't have the offbeat sounds here. So let's do this. Let's drag this over. There we go. I think that sounds better. Let's get rid of that 4th kick in this bar right here. Now let's go back and engage that filter that we had earlier. So let's right click and automate. Actually, we don't need to do that because remember how I said that the channel rack contains all our clips. So the automation clips are actually still here. So if I go to unsorted, right now we're unsorted. If I go to automation, we can find our clip that we had earlier and we can just click and piece it on our playlist. How cool is that? This means that you don't have to really copy and paste your patterns. You can simply drag them over here. And as I'll show you in the next example, and the next track example that we're going to make, you can trigger multiple parameters with one single automation clip because these automation clips are not linked to specific parameters like they are in other DAWs. But for now, let's just stick to this and add it to this track right here. Of course, we got to turn on our master instruments or our master effects again by clicking the effects enabler. There we go. If I wanted to add a reverb, I could also do that. Of course, it'd be better to make a pre-master channel, but I could load it here on the master as well. Let's add a reverb. Right click right here and select our Fruity Reverb 2, which is this guy. There's also a Fruity Reverb 1. However, you have to find it in the other section, but Fruity Reverb 2 is an improvement upon the original Fruity Reverb. And that's the other cool thing about FL. They keep supporting some of their older plugins. So if you have really old projects from like 15 years ago, you can still load them today, which is amazing. Now I'm going to use the wet knob right here and automate the wet knob so that as the track progresses, I can load this up. I can also use this knob right here, and this knob right here on the mixer is actually a blend between the dry signal. If this is all the way to the left, it's all grayed out, and if it's all the way to the right, and it's all white, that is representative of having 100% wet on that plugin. So even if your plugin doesn't have a mix knob between the dry signal and the wet signal, you can use this right here. So it's very helpful. So I'm going to keep this like that, and I'm going to bring this all the way down. Right click to automate it. Again, you can select create automation clip, or you can simply just right click and press A, and we can automate this. As you saw, I kept holding on to this thing, so make sure that you let go of it before the next part starts playing. But here we go. Well, there we go. We created a nice little reggaeton pattern, and we can just press Control A, Control B, and remove parts out of B section. And as easy as that, we got quite a bit of time in you know, we actually created what, a 40-second arrangement, which is not that bad. And now we can just, like I said, remove some of these kick drums, remove some of these instruments, add more instruments, and you guys pretty much have a song. Cool. I'm gonna press File, New from Template to clear this out, and I'm gonna select Basic with Limiter. I could also choose an empty pattern. So let's go ahead and do that. Select empty. And now we have no instruments loaded in the channel rack and no effects anymore. So let me see if you guys have any questions in the comments section. You guys asked if having a limiter while working is good or not. Well, it depends on what you're doing. If you are at the final stages of your mix, having a limiter is good because you can kind of see what the mastering engineer would do. However, I don't recommend it because it's going to color your sound in some way or another. Oh, you thought citrus was pronounced citrus. It's pronounced citrus. It's funny because even if you load up citrus, it's loaded up. There's a little orange right there. So yeah, it would make sense. I used to call it citrus too, but I call it citrus now because of the Y. Also, a lot of people pronounce it citrus. So yeah, it's like a bit of the Moog or Moog thing. Except Moog wants to be called Moog, not Moog. But a lot of people who are not from America call it Moog. But yeah. Okay, so now we learn how to load up plugins and load up effects into our mixer. We also learned how to automate things, and we learned how to arrange tracks, how to group patterns, how to split patterns, how to copy and paste patterns. So now we're feeling much more comfortable. And we did briefly touch how to use the piano roll a little bit, but we're going to do so a little bit more now with this next example. So I'm going to go again to File. I'm going to clear out these instruments right here. So now I don't have anything. If I try to play my MIDI keyboard, there's going to be no sound, of course. So I'm going to go to my plugin database. And actually, no, not the plugin database this time. This time we're going to actually load up samples. So the sampling thing inside FL Studio is quite cool. So I can go to sounds. Let me see. Packs. We'll go drums. Let's say I wanted a big old school 909 crash. I can load it directly into my playlist, but just by literally just dragging and dropping them. Of course, the volume is going to be really loud, so that might not be the way to go. Also, this is kind of weird if I want to sequence it, so this might not be the proper way to do it. So I can cut this, or just delete this by pressing Alt-Delete, then pressing Enter to delete it. I'm going to load this into the channel rack, because that's my preferred method of sequencing things. I'm also going to add a 909 ride, and basically I'm going to try to create a 909 kit. So you guys can see here, there's plenty of classic drum samples included. And right here, I'm just pressing the up and down arrows to move down. Cool. Let's use just stick it with a pretty standard 909. Let's go to the kick drums. Now, let's say I wanted to use a tonal kick drum in my track. If I wanted to find out the pitch of it, I can right click, select Edit in Audio Editor, see Edison. You see these little regions right here? Select the regions and select Detect Pitch Regions. And now we know that this kick is in D#2. So if that fits my track, I can use it. If it doesn't, I'll use a different kick. Go back and Detect Pitch Regions. This is in D#2 as well. And it might be the case that many of these kicks come with a certain pitch because they're meant to be used in a certain note, and then you can pitch them around. Let's see, pitch regions, E2. So this will work nicely with my track because my track will be in E2. Load it here. And now let's add a snare and a clap. So let's go to percussion. And I'm on clap. And I could also simply just search, like right click. Select the 909 snare. And boom. Got a 909 snare right there. So you can either use the subfolders, or you can simply right click and search as Smart Find in this folder. So if you guys have never used a Smart Find in this folder, you can right click Smart Find this folder, and it will also show you the information on subfolders. So let me show you that real quick. Right click, smart file in this folder, and let's choose 909. If I press F3, it will jump between the folders. You see that? And if I press F2, it will go back between folders. So it doesn't really matter the way whatever company you buy sample packs from, how they organize their folders, because with FL you can quickly load up different samples from different folders. As long as you're using the smart search, they will show you instruments that are related to each other, which is very cool. You guys are asking a few questions right now. I will answer them in a few seconds because they're really important questions. But like the pitch correction and the samples, they're very important questions. But I will answer them in a bit. Okay. So we have this kit right here now that we've made. And now if I want to reorganize the way the kicks are and the snares are laid out, because I'm used to having my kick all the way on top, I can press Alt, send it all the way to the top. I can do the same thing with my snare. And then I'll grab my clap. And then my crash should be all the way at the bottom because that's what I'm used to. Okay, there we go. So now we got a pretty traditional setup. I can click right here to make new steps. Now my tempo is too fast, so let's slow this down, set it to 130. Let's add a snare. Let's add a ride. Now you notice that this is very loud, so we can either click on the instrument or change the channel volume right here. So let's just do that from here. Now the other thing you'll notice is that the length of this is too long. So if we want to change the length, we can cut out the length. Now the cool thing about these effects right here is that they're pre-computed. So they're built into the channel rack. Once you edit these, they're not affecting your CPU whatsoever. So if you see, my CPU is barely at 1. I can add even more effects like the stereo delay to make a Haas effect. And a little bit of reverb. I can even do some filtering. So these are really cool pre-computed effects that are built into the sampler. Let's move on from that and let's put this on a playlist. And let's do this again. Press Ctrl G to make a new group out of that pattern that we had earlier. So it's easier to copy and paste it. Now I'm going to select the second pattern and make it unique. Now what I want to do with the first pattern is remove the rides, which is a typical house thing when you drop, you don't bring the rides until the second half of the drop. So until over here. Now another very house thing is the crash. So let's go back to that question we had earlier about if it's better to load up the track in the sampler or as audio format. So let's grab the crash. And as a matter of fact, let's bring in the crash as well from over here. We're gonna drop it on the P right here, and now look at the level meter when we are looking at this crash. This goes all the way to minus, well, not minus, but 0 dB, because the track is normalized to 0 dB as most samples. So usually we do not want that. So we would have to lower the level of the clip right here from the channel rack, or once we put it on a mixer track, we'd have to lower that here. Because as you can hear, it's very, very loud. Now, if you load this directly into the sampler, like we did earlier, and trigger the crash at the beginning of your loop, let's solo the crash. You notice that the level of it is much quieter, and that's because the volume level of the channel volume, when you load it up here, is set to 80%, not 100. And as a matter of fact, there's a second volume that not many people know of. It's in here. You go to the little wrench tool, there's a second volume adjustment here. Right? So when you bring a sample into the sampler, it lowers the level of it because it assumes you're going to do other things like pitch shifting it, and it needs headroom to be able to repitch it, or else it's going to risk distorting. Also, if you reverse your sample or add distortion to your sample, as you can here, I'm not going to do too much distortion, but let's lower the level a lot. If you were to do that, it's of course going to change the gain of your audio. So it by default brings the level down. So that's important to know. Even if you're a new user coming from a different DAW, it's really important to know that the sampler lowers the level around 6 dB, so that you have enough headroom to mangle your sound around, instead of when you just drag it here, and it's literally just a set to -0 dB, which is very, very loud. Here you can do other types of audio editing. Of course, you can also kind of add some of those pre-computed effects, but you're not able to use the filter or the 80 envelope like you can inside the sampler. So that's one of the benefits the sampler has. Okay, so here we have now the little groove we had. Let's fix the crash. Reset the time. Any plugin or any parameter, I should say, in FL Studio, you can simply right-click and set reset. So if I change the multiple here, I can right-click, reset it. If I made this too short, I can right-click and reset it. Cool. I'm going to lower the level of the crash even further. And the other thing I'm going to do is add the stereo haslet effect. Make it very, very short though. There you go. So add a little bit of width. Now let's add our instrument, which is going to be the melodic instrument. Let's add a citrus. And the default patch for this is actually quite good. Alright, there's one thing I want to do to it though. I want to change the resonance a little bit, drop it down. Change the volume envelope on it to make it very... to give it more attack. And also if I go to the main page, you see other editor options for Citrus. So I want to keep it like that because I want to create a plot with this. So I'm going to press F4 to create a new pattern. And we call it chords. Put it in the playlist and drag it out. Now I'm going to loop this section right here. And it's as simple as right-clicking and dragging to loop the section. And I'm going to right-click to go to the piano roll. I'm going to start writing in some MIDI. I do need to see something real quick. I made a really big melody before, so I need to have a little bit of a reference, at least the chords. So let's go for D major, I believe, at first. Let's bring this up. And let's change the groove of this. Let's keep it. Put this in E, and E again. Let's copy this over, and pitch this up to G. Okay, cool. I'm gonna copy them over. And start to write chords. Now, if I'm a beginner, what I like to do is come up here to the stamp tool and select a minor chord, for example, or a major chord. Select minor chord. And it lets me know where the chord or what chord I should use. So for example, here I'm in scale E, and this is the chord I can use, right? So let's delete this E right there. Let's put this here. And just copy some of these guys over. Yeah, there we go. And I could do the same with this, or if I know a little bit about music theory, I can simply just grab these chords right here and drag up the notes and select the chord progression that we like. So let's write this out real quick. And right here, I made a mistake. I should have this be a double hit, I believe. There you go. So we were on this chord right here. And actually, let's change this chord right here. Let's actually turn this into a different chord. So I'm going to delete them real quick. Select them. Copy and paste them. And turn this into this chord. That is a mistake right here, but it actually sounds quite good. Let me just copy the beginning one just to make sure it's 100% right. There you go. Okay, we got a cool chord progression going. Now let's add a bass line. Now I'm gonna come over here back to the browser. Now inside the browser, like I mentioned earlier, we can right click and select Smart Search in this folder, and I want a bass, right? So let's search bass, and it'll give me certain basses. So let's pull up top bass, which sounds like this. It's pretty loud. So it's lower the level of it. I can either do that inside the plugin itself to make sure it's not clipping its own output. And if that was not enough gain reduction, I could also reduce it over here. Okay, cool. So I'm going to select the baseline here and copy it over. Simple as this. Press Ctrl C. I can also change, instead of having to right click and go to its plugins piano roll, I can simply come over here and switch the piano roll I'm affecting. See that? Press Ctrl V. And let's add a subby bass. So let's add a sub. And let's add this plucky bass. Now, I'm going to be triggering the exact same notes on all these three plugins right here. Now, I don't want to be copying and pasting all these notes over and over like this. It'd be really annoying. Because anytime I'd like to make an edit to one of the bass lines, like this, they would not follow each other, and I'd have to manually come in and move them around, right? So that's very unintuitive. So what I'm going to use is this plugin from FL Studio that lets you layer multiple sounds together and have them play in unison. And this is called the layer. Now, I can select the layer and tell the layer to set children. So I'm going to right click and drag to make a selection of a certain plugins or samples that I want to trigger. I'm going to set the children. I'm going to copy that bass line, and now the layer is going to trigger all these basses together. Let's solo the layer and these instruments. If you don't have a sub, you're not going to be able to hear this the sub bass right here. But they're all being triggered by this layer now. So if I make a change to this layer, it affects all of them. So if I were to change this to be this, awesome. Press Alt F12 to close all my other windows. Awesome. Now we have that bass line. Cool. Now we're clipping now, right? So what we got to do now is put all these instruments inside of the mixer. Now, it'd be tedious to have to drag these all over one by one. So instead, we're going to do this the alpha way. We're going to right click and drag to select all our instrument channels. I'm going to control left click and drag over here to select all the channels inside my mixer. Then press Control L to link those channels to my mixer. And voila. I have all my tracks named for me automatically and color coded as well if they had a color. All right. And now I can do some mixing. Now, let's say I wanted to group all these basses together because they're all basically one instrument. They're playing in unison. So I want to group them all together. I can press Control, right click and drag to go to a mixer right here. Right click and route to this track only. Now, all these 3 tracks are routed to track number 11. Let's rename this bass group. And I'm going to set it to be in blue. Press enter. And now this fader is controlling my basses. Awesome. Also, this allows me to add effects to all the 3 basses together. So let's add a gross beat, which is a very popular instrument amongst FL Studio users. This is that special plugin that's used in hip hop and EDM, in hip hop to change the pitch of melodies and chords, and in EDM to create sidechain effects and gate effects. So let's create a sidechain effect with this guy. I can left click and either load up gross beat by hand, or I can also type it and then press enter. Cool. So there's multiple ways of loading the plugins here. Now, I'm not going to get into exactly how gross beat works. However, I am going to say that there's a momentary tab that has really cool glitch effects and pitching effects as well. So some of these have actually been used by Daft Punk in the Tron Legacy soundtrack. So I believe, let's see, it might have been the stutter effects. Or the momentary. I think it was the momentary. But they'll use the on the Tron Legacy soundtrack, they use gross beat to create glitch effects. And inside our module, when we talk about the effects plugins that are included inside FL Studio, I will cover that. So make sure you guys subscribe to the channel so I can show you guys that in that class. I will also break down how to create those hip hop effects with the pitching in that class as well. So make sure you're tuned in for that. But for now, let's use the sidechain preset. And essentially what this is a volume editor on this side, on the top. If I go to the green waveform, it's a pitch editor. So if we go to the sidechain, we can edit the volume. Let's keep it nice and simple. So now the kick drum can actually play with the bass line and not overlap. This is clearly seen when you use the Wave Candy. So let's load up a Wave Candy. Now, Wave Candy is the metering plugin inside FL Studio, and it's a wonderful metering plugin. If you have never used it, I would recommend you guys to pick up the demo of it because it's amazing. So let's go look at the spectrum. Right here, it doesn't look like anything special, but as soon as we scale up the bands, we get a very unique way of looking at the spectrum analyzer. So if we hover over things, we get the note. So if I saw the bass group, we can see how the notes are changing there. We can also see that in Citrus. And if we open up the filter on the Citrus, or the envelope amount, we can see in a very precise way what happens to the frequencies, what frequencies are on, how long they are on, and how much level they have based on the color and the duration of said color inside of the wave candy. So it's awesome. It also has LUFS integration on the peak on the metering. It also has RMS, which is becoming outdated, but it has RMS as well, and has a stereoscope, vector scope, and an oscilloscope. So I'll talk about those later on inside of the class for effects. So now you can see here that we have the kick drum. It's very sustained. So now that we clean up our basses, we got to clean up our kick drum. So I prefer to do this from the sound source. So I'm going to fade out the ending of the kick and shorten it. And now we create a bass space for our bass line. Awesome. Let's play the track back. Now I feel like the top bass is a little too quiet, so let's bring it up. I'm gonna lower the bottom level of it, make it a little bit more crispy. And the snare is a bit too loud, so let's lower it down. Cool. Let's copy and paste these patterns. Oh, actually, we had made the second pattern of the hi-hats. So let's drag over the chords and make the chords unique. So let's add a pad. Now the pad has to be a more sustained instrument. So I'm gonna select the chords that I'm playing back. And I'm gonna copy them over to a new pattern. Press F4 and call this a pad. And then again, I'm gonna go to my browser, search under my plugin presets, SmartFine, and search pad. And here are a few pads. Or these are the Fruity Convolvers actually. But yeah, let's choose one of these pads right here. So bass, top pad. I could also look inside my plugins by selecting the citrus. And going into any of the pads that I have here. So here's plucked, piano, percussion, pad. I still, however, prefer to use the search engine over here because I can click right here, SmartFine, select pad, press F3, and find multiple pads for different instruments, such as citrus, the Synth, Ogon. So Ogon has really cool effects, and the Autogon is actually very interesting because it has over like 1 trillion presets because it auto generates presets. But that's for another talk. But right for now, let's come into the piano roll. Press Ctrl V. Oh, you didn't copy them over. So let's select the chords again. And this is simply pressing Ctrl and Shift to select multiple chords. This also works the same inside of the playlist with selecting multiple patterns. Press Ctrl C, go to that almighty preset, and go to the piano roll and paste it. So now if I press Ctrl L, voila, my chords have been dragged out to be the length until they touch each other. So now when I play the pad back, they sustain, whereas if I had them be short, they would not do that, and they would sound kind of choppy and weird. Hear that? They don't sound like they fully grow. Now let's add the grow speed to that to those pads. And a cool way to copy and paste plugins over from different channels is by simply left clicking and select Save Preset As and drag it over to a new channel. And now you can copy that preset over to the sectors as well. Of course, you can change the volume to change the effect of the sidechaining. Because in this case, we're doing sidechain via volume instead of sidechain via compression. And let's play this back now. Of course, with the rest of the instruments, so let's unsolo them over here by pressing Control and click. Cool. Now, let's say my leads, I think they're sounding a bit dry. I would like to have more reverb, so I'm going to disable the reverb that's built in. I'm going to add some send channels. So the way you do that in FL Studio is by clicking on a track. I'm going to go all the way to the last tracks I have, which I'm going to select the track 15 to the track 25. I'm going to press Control and click and drag. Right click on it and select track routing and go all the way down to dock to right. And now these are basically set up on a different dock. So this dock right here, it just shows me tracks are docked to the right, whereas the master is docked to the left. So now these tracks can become sends or group buses or whatever we like them to be. I'm going to turn them into group buses that basically do a little bit of reverb and a little bit of delay. So I'm going to rename this one, call it reverb large. Go to the next one. I'm going to call it ping pong delay. I'm going to add two plugins here. So let's press F8. I'm going to search for the Fruity Delay 3. Put it on the delay track. Press F8 and use Fruity Reverb 2. Put it on the reverb track. Now I'm going to select the effects to be 100% wet, basically, so that we're only getting the wet signal. And I'm going to select the delay to be in ping pong mode, create some panning on there, and change the timing to, let's say, half. And I'm going to set Citrus to send audio signal to these effects. And you guys are probably asking, how do you do that? Well, the same way we routed all these other bases to this other group over here. Except now, instead of sending Citrus to only one channel, we're just simply going to click this right here and drag this level down. So when I drag this level all the way down, it creates a sidechain signal. When I add a little bit of a level to this, you can actually hear in the playback. So now we have reverb on that. I'm going to make the reverb a bit longer, about 5 seconds long. I'm also going to open up the hi-hat a little bit. There you go. And lower the level a bit. And then send some signal to the delay. And now we got some nice and long delay. I'm going to send the pad as well to the delay, or to the reverb. Cool. Now let's grab this and arrange this to make a little build up. Let's grab the chords, just by themselves, and we're gonna filter we're gonna automate the filter cutoff. So let's go to the Citrus, go to the filter cutoff, right click and press A to automate. And again, because I only want the chords to play here, I'm going to make this unique. And I'm going to cut or remove the layer that's triggering all the basses. I can also increase the envelope. Or even better, right click and select link to controller. Now what link to controller will allow me to do is a very cool thing that's only FL Studio does. So that is routing this automation clip to affect multiple parameters at once. So if I go to internal controllers and I click on Citrus filter 1 cutoff, now this is going to be linked to the filter cutoff frequency of Citrus. So I'm going to hit accept. And now these two parameters, the envelope and the cutoff, are going to move together. Cool. Now I'm gonna remove that pattern and set them to only be the core pattern again. Now it's very important to understand that if we don't put our playhead right on the beginning of a measure, the growth speed is going to be a little bit off. That's why it sounded a little bit weird when it came to the drop. There we go. I just read the chat right now, and this is live. It's not a video. It is live. I am reading the chat. However, I can't answer every question at the moment because I'm running through these examples. But I will run through the questions at the end because we have a 30-minute open Q&A at the end of this class. Okay. So there's probably going to be just like 15 more minutes of the class, and once that is done, it's going to be open Q&A until we hit that 2-hour mark, okay? So don't worry. I am reading your comments. And one of them asked, let's see. Oh, what's the difference between routing to this track and routing to this track only? Again, if I set these guys to route to this track only, the basses, they only routed to that group, right? Now if I went back to the Citrus, you see how it's routed over here to the reverb and to the delay. If I right click and set route to this track, the master from Citrus is still being, the master is still receiving signal from Citrus, but the delay now has some signal from Citrus. So let me pump up the feedback. Oh. You see that? If I had selected route only, that Citrus is no longer going to the master or any other place it was before. Now it's only going to that delay. Again, if I send this to the master by routing to this track, and then selecting the route to this track on the delay, it's going to both tracks. If I did the route to this track only to that track, okay? It's pretty simple. And again, you don't actually have to right click to set them individually there. What I prefer to do is just click on things and change the level. If I wanted to sidechain, I just drag this all the way down. The cable becomes on bright. So you see that now the only thing you can do to this track is send sidechain signal. If you add a little bit of level, then you're getting some level, right? There you go. So now that I explained that a little bit clearer for you guys, let's create a little snare roll, because that's so typical EDM, but that's going to allow us to see another points of where this automation clip helps FL Studio users. So let's grab our snare and create a new pattern for the snare. We'll call it snare build. And we'll paste it on bar 9 and drag it all the way to the end of bar 15. I'm going to right click on the snare to go to the piano roll. Hit it right here. And create hits on the 1 or every step. Now if I wanted to create more steps like this, but without having to copy and paste them over, I can change my step tool to be half a beat, and now I can use my brush tool over here and drag this out, speed this up and do a quarter of a beat, and then let's do half a step, which is much quicker. There you go. Actually, the very last part right here, that's where we add these very last steps. There you go. Okay, now I'm gonna do kind of like the same trick I did with the filter cutoff frequency, except I'm gonna do it to the snare build. So I'm gonna go to the pitch of the snare, right click, and set create automation clip. And I'm gonna right click here to copy the value, so I can reset the snare to play in tune with the rest of the track at the end. And I'm also going to create a step right here, another step right here at the beginning of where I want the snare to start pitching up, and I'm going to pitch it up just these 3 bars right here. So I don't want to pitch up over here in this part because it will sound weird. Okay, if this was too aggressive, I could ramp this up a little bit slower. As a matter of fact, what I'd like to do now is make this even faster. Drag this guy over. And what we can do right here is add 2 claps. So let's press F4. Let's do claps. And we'll just add 2 claps right there. Of course, we want to change the snapping to be half a beat so we can actually see what we're doing now. Or else the steps will be too short. Okay, so now I want to add a little bit more brightness to the track. So I can either do this EQing the citrus patch. So if I add an EQ, it does a pretty good job, but let's say I want to add another instrument. Let's right click or go over here to find another lead. I'm going to open up a harmless. And this is going to be a super soft patch as well. Oh, wrong note. And what I'm going to do is simply grab the chords that the citrus is using or being triggered by and copy them into this harmor or harmless. I'm going to send the harmless to track 14 or 13. Now compared to the citrus, even when the citrus is opened up all the way, the harmless is a bit brighter. You can see it here. It's a little bit brighter in the high end. So what I want to do is layer these 2 tracks together, or 2 sounds together. And first thing I'm going to do is grab that growth speed and send it to that track as well, so they have the same sidechain. But now I'm going to add the same effects. So this is why it's important to add the effects on different channels. As someone asked earlier, why don't we add delay and reverb separately to why don't we add delay and reverb to tracks separately or to tracks individually? It's because we don't want to have to remake the reverb on every instrument, because 1, it would take up more CPU power, and 2, because then you have the imperfections of having different instruments in different rooms. So you kind of want to create a room where you have they set of same instruments together. So what I will do here is grab the chords that are triggering the harmless, and we're gonna right click the harmless on the delay and select route to this track, and we're gonna do the same thing for the reverb. So now they're using the same reverb as the Citrus is. Cool. So instead of having to put the effects on both tracks, I can just put them on one and just send those instruments to this other track. That way, if I keep adding more instruments, I can just route them there without having to worry about loading more reverbs or setting up the reverb properly and whatnot. Also, let's say, for example, you did load up a reverb here. On your Harmless. And then you decide to add some EQing here. You'd also increase the EQing of the reverb. So that's something that you would not want, because it would change the way we perceive the acoustics in that said room compared to the other tracks. So it'd be really weird. Also, if you want to add a distortion unit, for example, it's going to pick up that reverb as well. So it's out of the Fruity Fast Distortion or Fruity Blood Overdrive. Let me just change the output level here. Whereas if I had that Fruity Blood Overdrive turned on and then the reverb sent to a different channel, we'd get a much cleaner signal. And then we could also do cool effects, such as using a sidechain from that instrument. So if I select the sidechain input on the Fruity limiter, which is actually a compressor, and set the ratio. Now we can sidechain the reverb. So now the reverb doesn't play while my instrument is playing, but the reverb does play once it stops playing. So this makes mixing a little bit easier, especially for EDM when you're trying to get really loud RMS levels. Or, for example, let's say your vocal doesn't sound too present. You can put that reverb on the other channel by itself, sidechain it to the vocals, and now you have a little bit more space for the vocals or for whatever instrument you would like. Let's take up the Fruity Blood Overdrive. It is too much distortion even for my taste. Okay. And now I want to match the frequency cutoff of the Harmer to the Citrus. Super easy. I can right click, link to controller, and set to follow the cutoff frequency on the Citrus. So you see how instead of having multiple automations on every single channel or every single instrument, it can be cumbersome. And with FL Studio, we don't have to worry about that because we can do that. We can edit them all together. Okay, let's redo this. Now it sounds off because the growth speed's a little bit off, so. Also, the other cool thing about the automations here is I can grab all those growth speeds that I have turned on and mix them off. So I can right click, create automation clip, and link all these mixed pots on the gross beat, so that they're all turned off. That way, when I'm in my break of my track, I'm not getting those sidechain effects. Oh, I keep trying to overwrite the generic link when I should be selecting link to controller. Hit accept. Here we go. So now I can turn these all off before the drop. It don't sound weird. See that? Because they sound weird because they're getting sidechained. So that sounds good while it's in the drop and the kick is punching in first, but it doesn't sound good when you're in the breakdown of the track where there's no kick drum. Again, you're going to make sure that the gross beat level comes into 100 before the actual gross beat kicks in, because if you don't, then it's going to be out of sync. And that happens basically with any stutter or any effects plugin of that nature, where if you don't link them up properly, they will go a little bit off. It's almost like adding swing, but then if the swing was moved off to a different side, now the drop I forgot out of the harmless, so let's add them chords to the harmless. Now during the build-up, I'd like to add an effect, the typical riser effect that you see where it pitches. The saw wave just pitches from low to high, and I don't necessarily have to go to a preset pack to find one that fits my track. I can actually just grab, let's say, the basses that we're using and use that top bass, like this one, to create my build-up for my track. So if I press F4, I'm going to call it build synth. I can put the pattern right here, make it the 7 bars it needs to be in this case, and set it on E. Put 7 bars right there. Just make sure we cut it precisely. Now I'm going to do a really cool thing that's available in FL Studio and not pretty much any, I don't think any DAW has this. I can double click on this and enable Portamento. So I'll talk about this later in the class about MIDI editing, because it's again it's a pretty broad subject, but right now I'm using it in a very specific context. I'm going to use this to create a little pitch effect. So whereas if I use this on a melody, it'd be used to create those portamento effects that you hear in the tracks like Astronomia. It's a really popular track, but they use the portamento glide effect on that track. But check this out. And we could even be more drastic with this effect if we layer them up together with something else. So let's make the pitch really, really high up in the last 3 bars. Likewise, like we just did with this, we can also use a filter envelope. And now what I'm going to do with the filter envelope on this guy, on this bass that we turn into effect, I'm going to add the Fruity Love filter. Change the filter type to low pass. And have it grow as the track progresses on that builder up. So instead of writing the automation again, I'm going to left click and link to controller. And I'm going to link it to my channel pitch from the snare drum. So it rises along with the snare drum. Actually, this is going to be, sorry, I meant to use this as a high pass. So link to controller. All right, cool. So I can actually now mix this in to just have a little bit of that effect. And the other thing I could do is send some reverb to that specific track, the bass. I'm having a hard time deciding if it's a bass or if it's or to call it a effects, but you know, it's doing both things in the track. It later becomes the top bass. Right? But now, going back to that topic of why we should add reverb and delay to a separate track and load up our reverbs there, instead of having to use the bass group to put all our reverbs on it for the basses, I can just grab the top bass and send some reverb to it, like this. That way I'm not adding reverb to the sub of my bass, and then I could also EQ my reverb over here. So I'm gonna press F8 and load up an EQ. There you go. Lower the level of this. So let's render this track out just so that we show you guys again how to render. I'm going to select the range I want to render by right-clicking and dragging on my playlist. Also, let's put a little bit of a mastering effect here. Let's go to Maximus. Okay, let's render it out. File export WAV file. Call it trance or whatever you want to call this genre of music. Press start to start rendering. We could also select MP3 if we wanted to render MP3 at the same time. Choose dithering and disable HQ for all plugins if you like. All those things I'll mention later in the audio editing class. Hi Mojito, what rendering or what ratio knob are you speaking of? Are you talking about the fruity limiter or the Maximus? There we go. Now let's disable our master effects. And go back to our project folder. And there we go. Here's a trance track. And there you go. So we created that track. We did the reggaeton track earlier. So we got 2 tracks done in 2 hours. So pretty cool. And now I'll open up the Q&A for, let's see, 20 minutes. Because we did go a little bit longer than we should have. But it's important that you guys understood the basics of FL and how it works. Let me look at the comments. Hi, Perotos. Thanks for subscribing. We had a question earlier by Ganesh asking if it was important to tune the kick drum. And it is important, and some people will say it isn't important. However, if you're using these kick drums that are very typical in EDM where they're long and tonal kick drums, like this one, they do create a tone, and if you add distortions to them, oh shit, sorry, that was really loud, my ears even hurt. Okay, if I clip this, let me lower the volume, of course. if you're creating kicks like this, or 808s that have a lot of drive to them, yes, it's very important to tune your kick drums. And actually, I'll talk about this when we talk about the instruments. It is important to tune them because now you can actually pitch them. And let me set cut self. So if I had an 808 in here, I could pitch them up and play around with them and write them like in melodies. So let me show you that real quick. But before we destroy this kick in the track, let's remove this. There you go. By the way, of course, you want to save your projects. The best way to do it, in my point of view, is going to Options, File Settings, Project, and setting a data folder for the project. Here I can click on where I want to save the folder. In my case, I like to save them by month. So go to Projects, Projects 2020, May 2020, make a new folder, and I'll call this FL class trance track. As you can see, I can't spell. Press OK. So now all my data is going to be routed to this folder, and also any audio record is going to be set up to go to that folder. And I'll cover more of that in the class. So once I set the data folder, again, under my documents, come on. No way to change it. This PC documents, image line, FL Studio, projects. Of course, you could save this basically anywhere else you like, but this is just the way I like to do it. Also, I didn't cover it earlier because it's just so specific for my point of view, but it's also very important when it comes to saving audio. So I'm going to select OK. And now it asks you to save the project. So I'm going to save it as FL Studio class and trance. There we go. So now if I save audio, it's going to save it to that specific folder. And let me show you guys that real quick. If I were to right click on the chords and I could render and replace the audio. See? Now we have the audio of that on my chords. Of course, and now it's going to be inside my data over here. So project data, you find the chords right there. And if you open this up in Windows, which is going to be Projects May 2020, Trans track, and then select Windows Shell menu, open. Let me drag this over here. Ta-da! My audio is there. My project is there. Awesome. If I were to do the export, it would have also been sent here. So that's also cool. It's very important to be organized, and it also is helpful in the long run. Thank you guys for tuning in, and make sure you guys subscribe because we're going to have a lot of more content coming up. Let me show you guys the schedule real quick. So today's May 21st, and we had the intro to FL's workflow. On the May 28th, which is next week, is going to be recording and audio editing. June 18th, we're going to cover MIDI editing. June 25th is going to be FL Studio Synths. July 16th is going to be FL Studio Effects. July 23rd is going to be a review of everything we will cover and all these classes. So make sure you guys subscribe and like the video. And leave any questions. If you guys leave any questions and I can't answer them right now, I might be able to answer them in a later stream as well. So I do look at the streams comments. Don't think I don't. It's just that I have a set class because I want to cover as much as possible so that everyone can learn. Going back to the kick drums like I was saying. Now that we saved the actual project, let me make a new one. And make this empty because we're on the topic of kick drums. So let's go back to our packs. I'm going to search for an 808. Again, I'm going to select Smart Find for this folder. I got the 808 crash. Of course, if I press F3, I can eventually come to that 808 click. Awesome, cool. This is a standard classic 808. So let's distort it. Just clip it, but let's turn the output down. Now, I'm gonna go back to that 808 kick, set to edit an audio editor. And I'm gonna, once again, go to the add region section and select detect pitch regions. Here we see that the kick is tuned to G. We could also see this inside of Wave Candy. And this is why I love Wave Candy, because I think it's so helpful. Because I don't even have to load up Edison, but Edison just the for sure way to do it. But I like to do this with Wave Candy because I always have a Wave Candy loaded up in my session. And I also reset my FL from scratch, so I'm doing all this as if I was a new user. So I would typically save this as a preset and have it load up exactly like I did here, you know, changing the scale and changing the resolution to a different band that suits me best. But if I kick or play the kick drum, I can come over here and select the frequency that the kick is at, right? I can see that's in G because it's in 49 Hertz. If I went to the 909 kick, I could see that it's in G as well, or G sharp. This one sounds a bit deeper. And it was around F1, so 42 Hertz, 43 Hertz. That's a bit tighter up top, so it's going to be G sharp. So you see how quick it is to actually see the pitch of your samples and your instruments using Wave Candy. That's what I prefer using Wave Candy. Like I said, the Edison way is pretty much sure on point all the time, and you're able to see the sustain or the decay of the kick drum and the pitching down. So it's also really cool to do that. You're also able to see the spectrum view as well. So if I change the view to spectrum, we see the view of the spectrum here. So we had a different kick drum. That changes drastically. Because the 808 is much cleaner, right? Then let's say an acoustic kick. So you can see your spectrum and the pitch on both, but I prefer using the Wave Candy because it's just so easy. I can just click on things around and see the pitches of everything. I mean, it's so easy to use. Okay. But enough of that. Let's go back to the 808s and our Destroyer 808. I'm going to change the pogo on this to make it a little bit... That's fine. Now, it's important to pitch them because when you actually go to try to play melodies with your 808, you want to make sure that they're in key. So I'm going to go to my wrench tool, tell it to cut self so that we don't get that rumble we were getting earlier. You hear that? They're overlapping. So I'm going to cut them by themselves. So every time I trigger this, it overwrites the last note that I selected. The next thing I'm going to do is back at the wrench tool, I'm I'm gonna tell the program that the kick was in G. So I can go to G right here, and I can make sure that the kick is in G by hovering over to Wave Candy. Oh wow, oops. And seeing that it's in G. Cool. So now when I go to my piano roll, I can actually write melodies in specific frequency or specific notes. And it sounds very lame because this is like a really classic 808, so the pitching is like super slow. But if I was using my own 808, it'd sound much cooler. As a matter of fact, we can change the pitch of this inside the sampler. So let's go ahead and do that. Cool. Let's see what other questions you guys have. Yeah, it's a really cool way to make a riser like that, Mojito. It's like I said, I don't see enough people doing it, and it's so simple to use. And the cool thing is that you're using the same exact instrument, so it's already mixed. All you really have to do is maybe change the level a little bit, automate it so it's not as present in the as a riser as it is in the track. But it's a really interesting way to do it because you get the same tonality. You already processed. You already probably have reverb on it, right? And then you could use it to create pitching down effects too. So it doesn't just work as a riser. You can also use it as a pitch down effect. And as a matter of fact, this is how I do my sub impacts as well. How I do the risers, the sweep downs. It's really cool. You can even assign. Let me show you. Mod X information. So if I create the glide effect, right? And let's say I filtered out my 808 here. Not only is it pitching up, but it will also open up the filter. So let's go ahead and go to the Mod X. I'm going to go back to the original note right here. I'm going to lower the Mod X right here. Press accept. And I'll also go back to the other one and increase the Mod Y. See that? So there's only low end at first. And now there's a lot of high end over here. So we could do this the opposite way too. We can even make little glides right here. Watch. So it's a very interesting way to work. And you said you had problems setting up the fruity limiter threshold. Let me go back to the track. Now let's go to the sidechain and solo the harmless. Let's mute the other track. Let's mute the delay as well. We have the limiter here. So right now the threshold is not enough to be activated. So let's also turn on the the citrus. Now when I engage the threshold, and the ratio, there should be gain reduction. I don't know why it's can't see right now. But let's add even more level to this. There you go. So if I set the ratio to harsh, it's going to cut off everything. Likewise, if I set the threshold too low, it's going to cut off more of the sound that's coming in. If I lower the ratio and the threshold a little bit, more of that reverb or more of that original sound can come in, right? If I was doing this on vocals, for example, what would happen would be is that the compression would be engaged much sooner and much harder if I push the ratio. So threshold dictates the level at which the compression happens, and then the ratio, how hard it happens. The knee also has a lot to do with that, so it could tell you how quick it rises or how quick it clamps on things, right? The attack also has something to do with this. Let's increase the attack on this. So now there's a tiny little bit of reverb coming in before it actually starts to duck. So we can hear it clearly with the attack of the leads. When we have the attack all the way down, the clamping down on the reverb is almost immediate. If I pull it back, the transient of the leads and the attack is suppressed a little bit because of the reverb. And then the release is very important because it dictates how quick the compression lets go of whatever it's trying to hold down. So if you set it too slow, or too slow, I mean too fast, you might get distortion, like in this case. And let's actually remove the sends of the citrus and the harmless going out to the master, so you can focus on the actual reverb itself. So now you can really hear the distortion. Whereas if I have the release a little bit longer, I have less distortion, a bit smoother. And when I stop, you get the tail of the reverb. So I think actually running, doing some sidechain compression and trying out the free limiter on the reverb is actually really cool to learn, because it really shows you in a very dramatic way what a compression actually does. Again, let's mess around with the threshold. So that tells me again when to compress. If I wanted to compress at quieter signals, and how harsh I want to compress. So now we're only getting the end portion where the leads would be cut off right here. That's all we hear. Right? If I pull the threshold up, we would still hear some reverb at the same time as we hear the leads. If I mess around with the knee, it changes how drastically the ratio is gonna be affected. So let me show you. it's a little bit easier to see it like this. So you see that? It says, hey, after this point, we're going to rise up quicker. Or after a certain point, we're going to slow down and not rise quickly at all. And the sustain, this is a little bit of a weird thing inside of the 4D limiter, so I'm not going to talk about it because it actually functions different to what a regular compressor does. So don't worry about that. I'll cover that in a later class. Okay, so we're hitting the 2-hour and 30-minute mark, so I'm going to call it a day. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you guys have any more questions, leave them, and I'll try to answer them in a later class. Again, to show you guys the classes that we will be hosting, they're going to be on May 28th. We're going to be doing recording and audio editing. June 18th, MIDI editing. June 25th, FL Studio synthesizers. July 16th, FL Studio effects. And July 23rd, we're going to do a review. We're going to cover everything we did again. So I want to thank you guys for watching, for staying tuned in, and for coming to our FL Studio 20 webinar for Pro Tools users, for beginners. And I hope you guys enjoyed the class. If you guys have any suggestions of what you would like to see in the next classes, let us know. And I'll catch you guys next week with our recording and audio editing class. Okay, stay home, stay safe, and we'll talk to you guys soon. I'm Kevin Ochoa, and I'll talk to you guys then. Peace.